We might lose our physical body, but we don't lose ourselves. Ourself just goes elsewhere, and it's obviously then invisible. And the frustrating thing is that our ancestors knew all this, but it's the last few hundred years in the West we seem to have deliberately ignored or forgotten all this. And for some reason, our materialistic, scientific way of life in the West, we have deliberately sort of ignored what our ancestors were telling us, really.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Jeremy Spillane, and we're going to be talking about his new book, Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife, which is the story of what happened after the death of his in-laws. Jeremy raises the question, what if the afterlife isn't a belief, but something that can calmly be documented, observed, and revisited? Jeremy talks about the ongoing communication with his two deceased family members, which was captured repeatedly using investigative methods more commonly associated with paranormal research. In addition to the evidence he collected, Jeremy also shares a lot of anecdotal situations which occurred over these past years and what he has learned about life from these people who have been communicating with him from what he likes to call the afterlife. It's not a sensational ghost story, but a gentle, evidence-based exploration of what may follow a physical death. It also offers a reassurance for the bereaved and some very thoughtful material for skeptics. So let's jump in. This is Jeremy Spillane. Good morning, Jeremy, or good evening to you in Yorkshire, East Yorkshire. That's where you are?
That's right. Yes. Good morning, Bob. It's lovely to speak with you.
Yeah, you too. You too. I usually don't do this topic, but when I was reading about your skepticism in the beginning and the type of life you were leading that had really nothing to do with the afterlife or any of these kinds of ideas, I thought, well, let's talk to this guy and see what actually happened. And then, of course, we're going to talk about some of the what would you call it, tests or equipment that you've used to verify or at least help to understand what's actually going on with this. First of all, let's just start with, who are these two people that you have been communicating with for how long, and who are they?
So Joan and Roger were, or should I say are, my in-laws, and I knew them very well. I met them over 40 years ago. So Caroline, my wife, who you might just have seen a minute ago helping with the setup, she obviously, Joan and Roger were her parents, and I knew them as well as my own parents, I feel. And anyway, in 2017, Joan died totally suddenly without warning. She did have a heart problem, but it was a big shock to us all. We all thought that Roger would die first because he had a whole list of medical problems throughout his life, including having a triple heart bypass operation, and he got through all his medical issues well until about the last year or maybe 2 years of his life when they caught up with him. So Joan died 2017, just before Christmas 2017. She and Roger were sat in their living room, and she just was getting up out of her chair to leave the room, and she just collapsed with instantaneous heart failure. No time to say goodbye or anything. And so Roger rang Caroline at our house, and we lived about 30 miles away from them at that time in West Yorkshire. And so obviously we rushed over on a very cold, frosty nights to just be there. And Joan was lying on the carpet in the living room, dead. The ambulance had arrived really quickly, which was lucky. That was a relief, because ambulances can be very slow in our country sometimes, and that obviously is terrible if that happens when someone's ill. But anyway, the ambulance came quickly, but there was obviously nothing they could have done. You know, Joan did die literally within, I don't know, a fraction of a second, presumably, and collapsed on the floor. So when I got to know them both, sometimes I would try speaking to Roger about things like religion, life after death, and stuff like that. And if ever I spoke to him, he'd always tell me that there's no such thing as life after death. He said, when you die, that's it, that's the end. And he lived his life on that basis very much. I could see that he was a very active person, always doing things, and had loads of energy, more energy than I ever had, I think. And he would try and cram everything into his lifetime. And as he got nearer to the end of his life, into his 80s, then you could see that he was really making an effort to make sure he'd done everything that he was planning. So when Joan died 2017, Caroline and I, we instantly had signs that Joan was still around. She was giving us these amazing signs, turning on our television at night. Sometimes when we were fast asleep, the television would just suddenly come on of its own accord. And it wasn't just the one television in our house. It could be any of the televisions, depending where we were. We might walk into a room and suddenly the television would turn on as we were walking into the room, you know, for no obvious reason. And our bedside light would turn on in the middle of the night, wake us up. And we knew straight away this was Joan, and we loved these signs. And we just spoke to her and said, oh, that's fantastic. You know, thanks for giving us the sign. You proved that you're there. But after a while, we said, you know, we do need to get some sleep, much as we love these signs. And she would give us signs in the daytime as well. And she gave us some incredible animal creature signs as well. We tried talking to Roger about Joan's signs as we saw it, but he just wouldn't say anything. He had a strange look on his face of not really a smile, half grin, and he didn't know what to say, I think. And he obviously thought Caroline and I were total nutcases, and that was really it. We couldn't talk to him about the signs. And from his reaction, and he never said anything, we're convinced that he never got any signs from Joan himself. And I believe that would be because Joan obviously knew his beliefs and knew that if she gave him some signs, that would probably, you know, make him jump out of his skin and possibly give him a heart attack as well. So that's how I see it. And Caroline's sister, Alison, her younger sister, who's 2 years younger, she never said anything about getting any signs. And I believe she probably didn't get any either. But anyway, we sort of all got through lockdown, and Roger was, after a while, starting to try and rebuild his life a bit and start going out and about. And he was really starting to live his life again, even though Joan was not around. And Roger did have a very good friend who Joan had known, and this friend, Gudrun, a German lady, but she'd lived in England for decades, married an Englishman, and had a daughter, but her daughter had died in her 40s suddenly. So, you know, she and Roger had a lot in common. And one of the things Roger and Gudrun had in common, actually, was that they were both total skeptics. Neither of them believed in the afterlife. And even though Gudrun had lost her daughter, she didn't believe her daughter was still around in any sort of afterlife. So Roger was still a skeptic, and if ever I brought the conversation up, he would maintain his disbelief in any afterlife. And it was strange because we did actually know once he'd died and we were sorting out the house, or Caroline and Alison were sorting out the house, they did find various books that Roger had obviously been reading about other religions. So he had still been looking for answers, you know, is there such a thing? And he obviously hadn't seen anything that convinced him that there was any sort of afterlife. And he didn't obviously think there's any religion that was right for him. 4 years after Joan had died, then suddenly he was in hospital for the last time, the last few days. He was at home as much as possible, but he was still having these stints in hospital. So the last few days he was in hospital, and then he died with Caroline holding his hand. The nurse had called her and she'd gone down, not realizing that the end was that close, and she didn't understand when the nurse said, "Oh, you can come down if you want." And nurse didn't make a big thing of it, but Karen did go, not realizing really what the nurse was telling her in coded language. But she went, and Roger died with Karen holding his hand.
I was going to ask you, how long after Roger died did you get some kind of a sign from him?
As with Joan, really. With Joan, it was like within literally 1 or 2 days after she died, we started getting signs. We can't remember exactly, but it was very, very quick. And it was the same with Roger. Literally within a day or two, we were getting signs from him.
How did you know the difference?
Joan's signs had been pretty common initially, and then they'd gradually tapered off to a fair extent over the 4 years that she'd been dead for. But we still got them from Joan occasionally. But when Roger died, suddenly we got a deluge of signs from him, and we thought they were from Roger because they were slightly different to Joan's. So Joan would give us the televisions turning on and off, and as far as we know, I don't think Roger ever did that for us. But what Roger did was still sort of electrically or electronically based, because that seems to be what spirits are capable of doing comparatively easily. And everyone in this field seems to acknowledge that spirits cannot affect electronic equipment and possibly electrical equipment quite easily. So Roger was tripping out some of our power circuits in the house. So the resettable circuit breakers, as we call them, fuse boxes, but that's the old name for the old-fashioned ones. So the circuit breakers would trip out. So he might flash some lights, say our kitchen lights or something. We'd be in the kitchen and just with the lights on, and suddenly they would flicker and then perhaps trip the circuit out and the lights would go off altogether, and then I'd have to go and reset the circuit. And Roger would do this quite a lot, and he would trip out various circuits in the house. It was normally a circuit of something that was in the room that we were in at the time. So he'd normally turn something off that was in the room where we were, the light we were had on in the room where we were. Sometimes he'd turn off all the electricity to the whole house. And when the circuits tripped, it would make quite a loud bang as the circuit breaker tripped. And so it was always very, very obvious when he'd done that. And over the years, he did this many times. And since he's died, in fact, there's been 4 circuits in the house where I've actually had to replace some wiring, because whatever he was doing, it was somehow a large current involved, and it had obviously damaged some wires.
Let me ask you this, because I'm thinking, if this was happening to me, one of the things that I would do is I would talk out loud, and I would say, if that's you, do something right now, or give me or is that you? Can you show me a sign right now?
Yeah.
Can you? So you're having some kind of a attempt at communication in the moment. Did you ever do that? And did you ever have a result?
We did do that. We didn't really get direct results like that. We've found with Joan and Roger generally, they don't sort of necessarily give you a sign or it might not come at that exact moment. It has done with Joan. So the best example of that, I would say, was actually a few years after she died. And it was actually after Roger died, but we still think it's Joan because she seemed to specialize in some animal signs in her, in the early years after she died. So she seemed to specialize, one of her specialisms was butterflies. And I know this is something that a lot of people report, that butterflies.
Yeah, I've heard this one before. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with Joan, this example, Karen and I were at the cemetery where they were by now both buried, and we'd just been watching a program that morning before we went to the cemetery on signs, and it was about things like butterflies, etc. And I'd already seen the program, and I said to Karen, "You must see this program. It's fascinating." And so we watched it together. Then we went to the cemetery, did whatever we were doing at the cemetery, and then as we were walking out, Karen was talking to her mother and saying, "Mum, if you're there, give me a sign." And by this stage, we'd had a medium, an excellent medium, who had already told us that if you see butterflies, to Caroline, that's your mum. And we sort of knew that anyway from what she'd already done. But we were walking out the cemetery towards the exit of the cemetery, away from their grave. And as we were sort of getting nearer to the exit, Karen suddenly noticed one or two butterflies on headstones that we were walking past. And then she realized that there were actually lots of these butterflies all around us. There were several on several headstones and in some of the bushes nearby. So there must have been something like 20 of these red admiral butterflies. And we realized that was a sign from Joan. It was just the sheer number of these butterflies sort of all around us. And the strange thing was with that sign is we didn't see the butterflies arrive, and they were there for sort of less than a minute, probably, maybe 30 seconds even. And then we'd sort of looked again and they'd all gone and we didn't see them fly away. And Karen did actually get a couple of still photographs of those butterflies, but we knew that was Joan.
At this point, it's basically you and your wife are telling people this is what's going on. When did you decide to do further, I guess testing would be the right word, What did you do? I know you have a camera set up in your home.
Yeah.
And what did you do to sort of try to show other people that this was not just your imagination or something that was only happening to you and your wife? And what motivated you to do that? And then what did you actually do to bring in actual equipment, and what is it?
Like Roger, I had been brought up in a faith, but then stopped believing in life after death because at school I did all the science subjects, and to a supposedly scientific way of thinking, life after death seemed to me to just be unfeasible. It just seemed too incredible, so I didn't believe it. So I spent my whole life like Roger, open to the idea if I saw proof, but I haven't seen any good proof throughout my life. It was when Joan died and she gave us all her signs that suddenly that was my proof. As soon as Joan died in 2017, that's when I started in a big way my self-education of everything to do with afterlife, the paranormal, everything of that nature. So from 2017 onwards, I was watching all these programs on television, ghost hunting programs. I was reading literally hundreds of books by people, mediums and ghost hunters, paranormal, so-called experts, scientists in general. And in watching all these television programs, there was one particular one that made me think, oh, goodness, this is real. And that was seeing things on camera, paranormal things on camera. And this series that I watched that hit me the most, actually, was called Paranormal Caught on Camera. And it's an American series, which you might well know. And they have footage from all sorts of different cameras, security cameras and things, of strange things happening, like poltergeist activity where things are moved and there's no obvious cause for it. And it's, to me, they all look genuine, and I believe them. And I believed then, it hit me that yes, there really is stuff that we don't understand, supernatural things, and therefore life after death is quite possibly real. And from Joan's signs, I knew it was real. So I was educating myself in all this stuff, and in all these ghost hunting programs that I watched, I saw the equipment that they were using, and some of this equipment I really thought it genuinely works, and it really does see ghosts or spirits, and some of it really is effective. So even though the ghost hunting programs themselves always seemed over the top and two sensationalists, and they were all done at night, and I was scared of the dark, so I would never have done that. But Caroline kept talking to me, trying to gently persuade me. She said, why don't I get some ghost hunting equipment, because I'm interested in it and it would be fascinating. And I said, well, I really don't want to do ghost hunting. I'd be scared. I'm not going to do it in the dark, because that'd be just purely too frightening for me. If anything happened in the way of any strange events, bumps and noises or whatever, I'd be frightened out of my skin. As a child, I was scared of the thought of ghosts. My parents always told me there's no such thing, but I used to get nightmares. And so I really didn't want to do ghost hunting as such. But it got me thinking, and I thought, well, I know Joan is still around in the afterlife, and now we know that Roger is, because we're getting all the signs from him. We've been filming on our iPhone. So for more than 6 months after Roger died, we've been filming at the cemetery, and we'd seen various light anomalies, and we'd seen some in our house, actually, that Caroline filmed totally accidentally, and saw these incredible light anomalies in our house. I said to Caroline, I'll get a simple bit of ghost hunting equipment first, and we'll see if your dad does seem to be able to operate that, then possibly I might get some other bits of equipment. So the first thing I got it's this K2 meter, which you will be able to see possibly on the computer screen. So it's just a simple EMF meter, and they weren't designed for ghost hunting. They were just designed for domestic use, to check the electric fields around, say, your microwave oven or your television, and just check that things are safe in your house or your office or whatever. But ghost hunters found these things could work very well with spirits. So for spirits around, apparently the EMF meter might give a high reading. So I got this meter, and when it's just on and nothing's happening, as it is now, there's one green LED lit up. But if you get a high EMF reading, then all 5 LEDs will light up, including the red one at the top, meaning you got a full scale. You got the maximum EMF that this meter will detect. So I took this EMF meter to the cemetery to see Roger, and this was just about 7 months after he'd died. And we went there, and I turned it on at their graveside, because that's where I thought they would be, which is what ghost hunters seem to say, that cemeteries are full of spirits. And I realise now that it's probably not the case. But anyway, I knew Roger and Joan might be at the grave, and we turned it on and I said to Roger, are you there, Roger? And straight away he made this K2 meter flash way into the red several times, and found that we could speak to him and use it to converse with. So if he flashed the thing into the red, that was like a yes, or he might be agreeing with a sentence that we'd just said. So we were able to have a real conversation with him, it was a shock to me, because I wasn't really expecting him to come out with such a strong response on this meter.
It's amazing. So, is there a way for people to see any of this footage? Is there a website tied to your book, or how?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a website. It's called aliveintheafterlife.co.uk. But the book that I've written is due to be published at the end of April this year, and it's actually now listed on Amazon. So people can search on Amazon. If they search the title, Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife, they'll find this book very easily, and you can pre-order it, and then it'll be delivered once it's published, beginning of May. But while it's on Amazon, there's a really detailed listing for the book, and there's a picture of the front cover of the book, and on the front cover picture is a QR code, which is how the book shows all these various videos. So if you look at the QR code on the Amazon website, it works, and you can access that with your smartphone and get to our YouTube channel, where there's a whole load of videos, and each chapter of the book, virtually every chapter of the book has a video associated with it, which the chapter in the book describes in detail what you're seeing on the video. So each chapter shows this footage that we took, and this was a breakthrough when I wrote the book in how to deal with all these pictures, which are inevitably part of Joan and Roger's story. So the QR code gives very easy access to these videos, and people can see them. So if someone wants to look at this and see a video, I suggest the first one they look at is entitled SPR Investigator Confirms SLS Camera Sees Genuine Spirit, and it's a 6-minute 1-second runtime, and this shows you the video of what I described at the University of Northampton, where we see the spirit showing on a plain white wall, and the SPR investigator Aaron Lomas confirms that is a spirit. So that's the best one to watch initially, and then you'll get a feel of what the whole thing is all about. There are some longer videos on that, and some of the videos are quite long, and each medium, the 3 mediums that are involved that were so helpful. One of them is an American medium called Liz Murphy, and as with all the mediums, she gave some amazing readings to us. Particularly hers was particularly accurate with Joan. But so there's videos of all these things. So if people are interested, watch the videos. They're freely available. And yes, aliveintheafterlife.co.uk is our website. There's a whole load of stuff on that, which my wife Karen is adding to daily. And I do hope people are inspired to read the book, because it's an incredible story, and the whole idea from Joan and Roger is to get their story read by as many people as possible.
Amazing. I didn't realize. I guess that does make sense now that you've explained it, that you can have access that way to the videos. What have you learned or realized about life, the one we're living right now, from this? Has that changed your view of, forget about the afterlife stuff for a second? Well, you can't forget about it, but how has that maybe changed the way you live your day-to-day life? Is there something more spiritual, something deeper, a feeling that you have, a realization? What changed in you, knowing that this is something that is very real for you?
You say forget about the afterlife, but it does. It's in my thoughts daily. As I say, as a teenager, I stopped believing in the afterlife, although I was always open to seeing some evidence. And then I thought I might believe. And it's Joan that gave us that evidence initially, and then Roger has carried it on. So daily that affects the way I live my life, because now I know there's a point to living. We are eternal beings, and we, from everything I've read by countless people in this field, we will be reincarnated. So we come back to life every so often, every 100 years or whatever, every couple of 100 years perhaps, and we live another physical life here on Earth. And the whole point of life, apparently, it's a whole learning process. So humans are, and animals as well, we're all spiritual beings. So we are basically spirits who obviously have no physical body. And so we spend most of our time as spirits in the afterlife, wherever that is, around here or maybe elsewhere, who knows exactly. But then we come to Earth as a physical human being, and the idea of that is a learning process. So our life here on Earth as a physical being is a accelerated learning process. So apparently our physical life here on Earth is so that we learn our various lessons. So if we don't fully learn our lessons in this lifetime that we're living now, then we'll be back later for another lifetime as a different human being, and we will have some lessons to learn when we're in that lifetime. So eventually we all learn our lessons, and then we are higher level spirits, apparently. And I truly believe that. And I spent a lot of my life thinking, I don't believe there's an afterlife, although I always believed a God had created the universe, because it was just too incredible for it not to have been made by some all-powerful being, whoever this God was. But I thought, what's the point of life if you live your life, and then when you die, if Roger's right and if I was right in the way I was thinking, you die, and then that's the end of it. There's no more of you at all. It's like a black hole, and it's just total nothingness. Then it sort of means that life is a complete waste of time, really, isn't it? It just seems pointless if we are born and we live our life, and then at the end you're snuffed out and there's no trace of you and there's nothing left. So this proves that we are spiritual beings, and we, as a spiritual being, we've still got all our same character, our same personality, and we've had that proved with Joan and Roger. They behave just as they did as physical human beings in the afterlife, and we're obviously all part of the same eternal being. You know, we've all got one little tiny bit of spirit that comes from God himself, it seems. And so yeah, we ought to make the most of our physical life and do whatever we can. Joan and Roger are showing us, you know, they're there on camera, they're in the afterlife, and inevitably the equipment can't see an invisible human being, an invisible spirit rather, but camera can detect that there's something there. It does know there's a spirit there somehow. The air is obviously being disturbed fractionally, and the camera can detect that, and the air is somehow being disturbed by their electrical presence, whatever that is. And spirits do somehow have an affinity with electricity, and they can manipulate electricity. So in some form or other, even if we and the scientists don't know what a spirit is, somehow it can do something electrical, and it is some sort of electric field possibly. And my conclusion from everything I read is that any water vapor in the air, water is a polarized molecule, so any electricity can affect the water in the air, and all air has some sort of water vapor in it unless it's totally dry, which probably doesn't happen in natural atmospheric conditions. So the spirit can fractionally move the water molecules somehow, and the camera can actually see that with its million infrared dots of light that it sends out, and sees how they get reflected back. And it
really speaks to this idea of energy, that we're energy, which is another way of also saying vibration. And some vibrations are more sensitive than other vibrations. And so if we're looking at, this is how I'm seeing it, we're looking at these things on the camera, so maybe electrical energy or whatever that life force energy is, a camera may be able to pick that up, whereas my human eye would not. And maybe there are people, when you talk about mediums and people like that, I don't know much about that, but maybe those are people that are more sensitive to those vibrations than certainly I am. And so if we think about the universe as being energy and vibration, this all really does make a lot of sense. I'm a very eager skeptic. I'll put it that way. But I'm looking forward to checking out the videos. It's a really fascinating thing, and the fact that you are not somebody that really came from any of this kind of way of thinking really is a testament to something's going on. Let's put it that way. Something's happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's something sort of, as I'm talking to you and hearing about this, there is, certainly I want to believe that this is something, because I think most people are kind of afraid of their own mortality, or they don't really want it to end. And certainly, man has always sort of strived to want to believe this kind of a thing. And that maybe it's a yearning, and maybe it's a combination of a yearning and an actual knowing somewhere inside of us all that there is more to what is on the surface. And there's something sort of that makes me feel very warm, and I get, maybe the word would be eternal. Am I delusional? Maybe. I don't know. But there is a sort of a knowing inside, in my heart, I guess would be the best way to describe it. There's something quite beautiful about the whole thing. Not just man, but the earth and the whole universe, and how all those things sort of fit together. It's so mysterious. And it's almost musical. There's something sort of, which is also vibration. So that's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. So Caroline, my wife, has always been skeptical, I suppose, following on from her father. So she's always been more reserved. When I've said, "Oh, that's your parents on camera," she's always needed convincing that it really is. But I think she is convinced now. You'll probably see this K2 meter keeps flashing, so I think that's Roger just sort of agreeing with us when we're saying these things. But you're absolutely right. It is all energy. That is what it is exactly. And Karen's always told me, she said, energy can't be created or destroyed. It just be changed into a different form. So when you see a person and they die, and maybe they die suddenly, that's something I could never come to terms with. I always thought, how can it be that 1 second they're a live human being and then suddenly there's nothing? That doesn't make sense. But as you say, it's energy. So their energy does go somewhere, and it is their spirit. So you're absolutely right. It is energy. So we might lose our physical body, but we don't lose ourselves. Ourself just goes elsewhere, and it's obviously then invisible. And the frustrating thing is that our ancestors knew all this, but it's the last few hundred years in the West we seem to have deliberately ignored or forgotten all this. And for some reason, our materialistic, scientific way of life in the West, we have deliberately sort of ignored what our ancestors were telling us, really. And other cultures, they know all about the spirits.
What's funny is we look at that as primitive. and it's not. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to. We've run out of time here.
I realized.
That's just a testament to how interesting this is. So, I want to wish you great luck on your book, great success on your book, and
thank you.
And folks, check out the website is the same name as the book.
The website is Alive in the Afterlife.co.uk. The YouTube channel you can access from this QR code. It's just gone out my head, the name of the YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, the book is called Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife. You can search that on Amazon. But if you go to the website, aliveintheafterlife.co.uk, that's got all the information of our Facebook whatever channels and the YouTube channel by name. So go to the website as a first port of call, and then you can see all the other bits of information from there. You can get elsewhere and see whatever you want to see about it. But
well, thank you so much, and you have a beautiful evening.
I will. Thank
much
you.
Appreciation for you being on the show. Thank you.
Oh, it's been my honor. It's been lovely chatting with you, and you've asked all the right questions, and you've just got me talking, so I can't stop, as you'll notice. But,
thank you so much.
Thank you. That's great. Cheerio then. Bye.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website's theexplodinghuman.com. You can also listen on YouTube. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Jeremy Spillane for being on the show. Again, the book is called Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife, and you can find out more at the website www.aliveintheafterlife.co.uk. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.